What is the strangest thing you've witnessed someone do in public? I was stopped at a red light and there was a lady in the car next to me. She was having really sporadic head movements. Not the head bob dancing type, but just kinda crazy. After like 10 to 15 seconds of this, her neck went limp and her head just hung forward. The light turned green, and I hesitated a moment wondering if she needed medical care, and was about to pull in front of her to check on her when her head abruptly jerked back up, and she drove off without hesitation. I saw a dude with a suitcase, completely naked, entering our train. His facial expressions were normal. He looked concerned and stared at his phone the entire time, until I had to get out. I moved to a town which had a bit of a bad reputation. The first thing I saw, when I was bringing boxes in, was a man walking down the street with a bunch of plastic bags on fire. He was holding it like a lantern, and was so casual about it despite flaming plastic dripping onto him. Actually like the town though. It's got character. I used to work night shift repairing broken down trains. One night I was called out to a train parked up on a siding in the next town. So I went to the job, made the repair, and was sitting in the driver's seat chilling and smoking a cigarette before heading back. Alongside the siding, over a fence, was an industrial estate with a bunch of units. There was one apparently working, and a loading bay door open. I saw a security guy come out of the door and stand there looking out for a minute or so before he started dancing. The dancing grew into a full-on Michael Jackson style routine with moonwalks etc. No music. He maybe had headphones. Just this guy dancing away on his own in the night. That was unusual, but sort of okay. But he then stopped dancing, lied down on the floor, and started rolling sideways back and forth. Maybe 5 times left, 5 times right. Then he got up and went back in. I can see he got a bit carried away with the music on his headphones, or in his head, or whatever that led to the dance, but I don't know what the fuck the rolling about was for. I wrestled in high school and was down about 20 pounds for a tournament. We were walking back to the hotel after weigh-ins and my pants kept falling down as I forgot a belt. One of my buddy's dads asked me if I needed a belt, and I said sure do, thinking it was a joke, or maybe he had an extra one in the hotel. He proceeds to take off his belt, give it to me, pulls a second belt out of his front pocket, and puts it on. No idea why he had 2 identical leather belts with him that day, but I appreciated it. Standing in line in a store at the mall, when I hear a weird sound from a woman's large tote bag that is also slightly moving. Could swear I heard a quack. Couldn't be though, except it was. She saw me looking at her bag confused, so opened it and showed me that she had half a dozen ducklings in there. She said she had errands to run and couldn't leave them in the car because of the heat. Made sense, but I think carrying around half a dozen baby ducks in a bag is pretty strange. I was in a bathroom stall the other day when a little boy, maybe 6 to 7 years old, goes in the stall beside me. He sits on the toilet and starts humming some made up tune. That was already a little funny but nothing uncommon. Then he starts aggressively humming louder and louder. It gets to the point where it's almost just shrieking, and then he suddenly stops because he's out of breath. 2 seconds later I hear a plop in the toilet and he then begins singing hallelujah, hallelujah. I just pooped in the toilet, and repeats it a few times. I was almost passing out from trying to hide my laughter. I watched a woman walk into Chipotle, wash her hands for a solid 5 minutes under the Sprite in the soda fountain, and then fill up a trash bag fully with the Sprite, and walk out with it. An old dude put down his suitcase and started doing a weird interpretive dance. The worst part is that this was in a crowd of hundreds of people, and he was staring me down specifically with a creepy smile. I was a couple 100 feet away, and when I looked back, there he was, smiling, dancing, eyes locked onto me. Once went on a drunken walk alone. At one point, while walking through a part of my suburb, I heard a hello shouted from across the street. I look over and see what appears to be a man who is also walking around drunk. Well, he must have been even worse than me, because he proceeded to hug a nearby telephone pole and slowly slide down it until he was laying on the ground, still holding the pole. There's a guy who just moved to our small town who walks around shouting violent threats all day. His favorite is "I'ma kill you mother F." He was in the middle of a tirade when someone greeted him. "Hey Joe, how's it going?" And in the most polite, meek little voice he goes, "Oh, I'm good, thanks." Then he walked on and continued yelling about murder. At Bonnaroo I saw a guy with his pants down, D out, jerking off and staring at Paul McCartney's end of show fireworks. Then he was showing his D to some girls and a guy came up and punched him in the back of head, where he then started to hump the ground for a few seconds, then remained motionless, then humped the ground again. Security came and picked him up then. That was wild to watch. I brought my kids to the ocean. Long drive, but we started early, and as the kids enjoyed the ocean for the first time, a middle-aged woman wearing a uniform of some kind walked by carrying a large, about the size of a small suitcase, cardboard box. She stopped and stared at my kids. It was odd, so I said, "Excuse me, ma'am." And she wheeled on me and started shouting in some foreign language. I had no idea what she was saying, but she sounded pissed. She was literally spitting as she yelled at me. My kids noticed and ran back onto the beach. Then she shook this big box at me, and there was a dull thud as whatever was inside banged around. I dashed around her, grabbed my kids by their hands, and jogged away from her. I looked back, and she was still standing there. This was at a state park, so there were no houses anywhere near there. Weird. Years ago I used to work doors as a bouncer. Had one bloke walk up the road towards me well into his cups. One step sideways for every step forward. Ick, now what I mean. Spot the pub, spot me, and do the old straight arm march that every bloke does when they are trying to hide their intox level. Marches up to a hand's breadth away from me, stares over my shoulder at the door. "Evening, sir," I say. No response. "Not tonight, sir," I say. He finally looks at me, slurs something like "Why not?" I state the obvious. He ain't happy with that. Goes on a full minute tirade on how the world was against him, that every bouncer he's met tonight has been a cant, and that I was knocking him back cause he was Corey, Aboriginal, for Eusebius Reardon. As he's ranting, he's shrugging out of his clothes, and by the time he's done, he's stark bloody naked on one of the busiest streets in the city. He then holds a finger up, like a one moment kinda gesture, then projectile vomits on his clothes whilst trying to maintain eye contact with me. Finishes, looks back at me, gives me the sup upwards nod, then strolls down the street stark naked. I live in New York City, so that might be cheating, but there's a guy on the US who cosplays as a baby in a pretty interesting way. He'll walk down Fifth Ave in the 60s and 70s pulling a wagon with toys, and every few blocks he'll upturn the whole thing, throw a tantrum, toys everywhere, crying, fists pounding, etc. After a few minutes, he'll calmly put everything back in the wagon and do it all over again. First, let me say I think this is strange in an awesome way, not a bad way. There's a man in the city where I live. I don't know what he used to do for a living, but he got injured and is now on disability payments from the government for the rest of his life. He was so grateful to the country, the community, the people who's taking care of him now that he can't work at his career, that he went out and bought a bicycle and cleaning supplies, and now he cycles around singing merry songs and wishing everyone a lovely day while going from shop to shop asking if he'd be allowed to wash their windows as a thank you for his welfare checks. Super strange and super awesome. I've talked to him a few times and he'll be the first to state proudly that he is in fact strange. He just thinks we need more strange people in the world. Like, he'll see someone sitting on a bench just staring at the ground, and he'll bicycle right up to them and ask if they're okay. Look up, my good friend. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, and it's a lovely day. He won't pry, he'll just point out some positives and wish you a lovely day before breaking into song as he pedals towards his next shop window. I was on the bus heading to grad school one afternoon when this lady gets on the bus, her shirt covered in an uncown reddish brown substance that was on her shirt and caked around her mouth and face. She finds a seat towards the back of the bus, across from where I was sitting, and pulls from a paper bag a half-eaten rotisserie chicken covered in what either looked like raspberry jelly She then reaches into her pants and starts smearing what I can only assume to be her menstrual blood over the chicken as she then proceeds to take bite from the chicken and lick her fingers clean.